Hi everyone, and welcome to my Google On Air presentation on higher order thinking and creativity. My name's Alfina Jackson and I'm a primary teacher from Sydney. And welcome to those who are viewing. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see the presentation. Just bear with me. So, as I said, my name's Alfina. I am a primary teacher in a Catholic school in Sydney, and I'm really passionate about higher order thinking and creativity in my classroom to really prepare the students for the future. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about blooms and how I use that in my teaching. I'm going to talk a bit about flipped learning and how I use that to promote that creativity and autonomy in students. I'm going to talk a bit about Google Draw and how I use those Google Draw to encourage students to fill in graphic organisers. Talking about a bit about Google Slides and how to use Google Slides a bit differently to the usual presentations format that most people use it. And then I'm going to talk about, finish off with student choice. So there's a big shift at the moment where students have been typically thought of as content consumers, which means they're taking in content, they're consuming it, and they're not really doing much with it. And we want to take away that consuming content and encourage students to become creators of their own learning, using what they know and then applying it and solving real world problems, authentic problems, no matter what age they are. And I mainly work, the last few years I've worked mainly with infant students from kindergarten to year 2, which is where a lot of my examples are from. However, a lot of these examples can be translated to to older students, and depending on your context. We all know Bloom's taxonomy. We all know that lower order skills are at the bottom, such as remembering, understanding, and that we want students to move into applying, analysing, evaluating, and creating. These higher order thinking skills toward the top of the triangle is what employers want for the future. That's where the problem solving lies. It's just not rote learning as the lower order skills are. The first way that I promote higher order thinking is moving from content to creativity with flipped learning. Flipped learning at its core is content consumption. They're taking in content, but where the real teaching lies is where you can go with that content. Traditional flipped learning involves students having a video at home. They watch that video, whether it's the teacher speaking, whether it's a presentation that's been pre-recorded, and that's their homework. And then the idea is that they've consumed that content at home, and then in the classroom, you can then move into the nitty-gritty creative and problem-solving stuff. Because I do work with younger students, I tend to do in-flipping, which involves having the video in class somewhere and then moving on from there, doing that task. So I might have the video as part of a literacy or English group activity or a mathematics group activity where they're watching that lesson, but then there's opportunities later in the day, week, or the following week to refer to that content that they've consumed and really start unpacking it. And the beauty of that is the students can always come back to it. Videos should be short and sharp. There's no point giving students a 1-hour video for them to watch because they just don't have the time to do that. Your lessons in the classroom should be short and sharp so that students can get to the hands-on. So the video should be as well. If you have multiple content to teach the students, create a series of videos so that those students know exactly where to pinpoint that content. I have a bit of a rule where I sort of look at the age of the students and -2. So if I'm working with 5-year-olds, my videos are no longer than 3 minutes. Hence, if I was working with 10-year-olds, my videos are no longer than 8 minutes. Mainly because of interest, creating interest, attention span, and we don't want to give them too much content. It should be at a good pace as if you were teaching, despite the fact that they can pause, restart. I said flipping within the classroom allows the teacher to monitor that the students are consuming that content, can monitor who's watching the videos, and then from there, gauge, okay, let's move on to the problem solving. I encourage students, as you can see in the picture here, there's a child there while they're watching that video on Italy. They're filling in a graphic organizer. And this photo's from a kindergarten class. So teaching students how to organize the content they consume, that's starting to move into those higher order skills. They analyze that information and they organize that information. So they've got it in a quick and easy reference guide for when they move on to those higher order tasks. It's not the knowledge that's important. Well, the knowledge is important, but then you have to really focus on what you do with that knowledge and afterwards. That's what matters. So students understand that they're learning for a purpose. While they're organising that content under headings, they're understanding that information, which is a lower order skill, but they have to analyse where to put that information. So in this example, this little girl has watched her video on Italy. It's a kindergarten child. And the video is not in that order, depending on the graphic organizer I provide. So this little girl is actually one of the top students of the class, and she's been given more headings. She has been given headings out of order, and she has to know where to put those headings as she's watching the video. And the beauty is she can pause, start, rewind the video as she pleases. And that higher order thinking she's engaging in is, I don't understand, I need to rewatch it again. All the language she needs is on that screen, which helps when you're working with EA or D students who need to have that good models of language, so she can pause, copy the spelling of the words that she's using. And she's using skills that, even though understanding is a lower order, she's applying those skills in a higher order way. This graphic organizer, we then take the graphic organizer and then we teach them how to write an informative text. So these headings on this particular video are going to be her subheadings for an information report that she's going to write on Italy. Use that information. She's applying the information she's learnt. You could also say that writing an information text from what she learnt in the video can then be creating. And this is an example of a piece of writing created by a kindergarten child. It is August, so it's not quite the end of the year. And this child has used their graphic organizer to create the information text. I'm just looking at some of the questions. I might quickly answer 2 of the questions before I move on. One person's asked, Paul has asked, what program or tool do you use to create your videos? I use a range of tools. These particular videos, a series of videos that I've created, I've used a web app called Powtoon, Powtoon. I love Powtoons because of the way that you can manipulate things. And with the age plus -2 rule, that's probably through personal preference. I know that a student's attention span is their age +2, and taking into account their pausing and rewriting the video, take 2 minutes away to give them that chance, and also within their attention span. Looking at then flipped learning, I worked with a year 1 class a few years ago where I created a whole bunch of flipped videos on bugs, and they turned around and said, we want to be on YouTube like you as well, miss. So we went through the process of how to make a documentary video. We'd watch a lot of David Attenborough during this unit, and they absolutely loved it. And they loved the videos that I created for them, for their learning. And So I created this guide by guide steps. So they had to do the research first, and understanding that once you've got the content, that's your research, and then it's what you do with it that matters. With the script writing, they had to write an informative text, and then we moved that into a storyboard, which was using their content. They then had to collect what they were going to use to create content, and then they had to create their video using the technology we had in the classroom. And as you can see from the video screenshots I have on the screen, some students decided to find video images on Google. Some used clay and took photos of their images, and some decided to draw, and we scanned those pictures. And these children then created their own videos from the content they had discovered, they had researched. With my videos, I give students access in a variety of ways. My videos are all placed on YouTube. I give the students QR codes directly to those YouTube links, or I upload those videos into Google Classroom, into a Google site, or I share a Google slide deck with them, which has the videos embedded. That way they can access the videos without having to search for me on YouTube. Especially with younger students, they need a direct link. And in terms of devices in my classroom, I've worked from at the moment I'm working in a one-to-one classroom in a BYOD environment. But in the past, I've only worked with, there may be 6 iPads in the room. I may have 5 Chromebooks in the room. It depends on the school's resourcing. And that's why I tend to do my inflipping in an English or in a mathematics group setting, because then I can have one group watching the content. The rest of them are doing a different task. And I know that by the end of all the rotations, every single child has accessed that video in some way. So I'll move on to graphic organisers. And at the end of the presentation, I have links to my YouTube channels as well. I have 2 YouTube channels at the moment. So I'll show you those at the end of the presentation. Google Draw is one of my favourite Google apps, G Suite apps. I call it the bridesmaid of Google G Suite because not many people use it. And a lot of people I speak to about it say, what's Google Draw? I love it in a paperless classroom. My classroom is not completely paperless, even though I am in a high technology use classroom. I do believe in having paper. For example, you saw that the students were watching the video on a device earlier and they were doing the graphic organizer on paper. Just for the younger students need that. But I love sharing graphic organisers with them in a way that they can then fill in on digitally. So I find that there's more versatility to Google Draw when it comes to using graphic organisers than Google Docs. Google Docs is great if you have a table. But it's limited when you're doing things like, as you see on the screen, as a Venn diagram. The ability to put in text boxes where you want there's a lot more versatility in Google Draw. I use Google Classroom to share a Google Draw graphic organizer that I've created, and then share that with Google Classroom with make a copy for each student. That way I'm not sharing one document and then they go into file, make a copy. Google Classroom gives me the versatility to just send it in one click and they all get a copy the moment they open it. I'm getting them to move beyond remembering, understanding, to analyse, applying and evaluating where they put that information. So in this example on the screen, this child is in Year 2, they're reading Matilda and they're doing a Venn diagram comparing 2 characters. I started off with this particular class when I was introducing with mind mapping. I love mind mapping. I think it's a great way to organise information. The beauty of sharing the Google slide ready to go is that I put my learning intention and success criteria on the top. I've made the document and I've shared it with them, and I'm guaranteed to know where I can find it when I need to mark it afterwards using comments. And this is an example of a Venn diagram. Again, I shared the learning intention and success criteria, and the students were able to organise their information. It's just moving beyond that, remembering. They're analysing, where do I need to put that information? What's common, what's different? And then you can extend them in different ways. So this particular child did the double Venn, the two Venn, and then I said, let's add another circle into your Venn diagram. So then once she completed the dual Venn diagram, we added the third, and then she had to reorganize her information. So there's differentiation on the spot. It's not having to, let's get another sheet of paper. Let's give you now the triple Venn. You can copy what you've done so far in there. We're doubling up on work. So once she did a double Venn, we added the third circle, and she was able to manipulate that Venn diagram to then create the third circle. Not only use Venn diagrams, I've seen this used in KWL charts, Y charts, where you have what you see, what you feel, and what you smell if you have the senses. The beauty of this is that they can bring in images as well. I had a Year 1 class who had to do a brainstorm on what they knew about water, and they brought in images, they brought in words. And then when you mark it, you just mark it using the commenting feature on the side. It's a great tool that most people do not know about. Looking at Google Slides, most people know about, let's create a presentation, but there are many more different ways you can use Google Slides. And one of the ways I like to do is to use it for a class workbook, for example, as well. If you're creating presentation, you're just focusing on remembering and understanding. But you need to move beyond that. They are creating a presentation when they're doing, for example, creating an ebook, but then it's what they do with that information. So the screenshot you see is an example I gave my students, is that we created a class Google Slides where everyone had editing rights, where they had to create the book review document. So I gave them the sentence stems that we started off at the beginning of the year. I liked, I disliked, and I would change. Just 3 sentence stems is what we started off with. And as the year went on, and as students developed their ability to evaluate books, we added more sentence stems. And that's where the differentiation comes in as well. Those who were more capable moved into the harder sentence stems, where the lower ability students just stuck with the same 3 sentence stems for most of the time. I find interest-based tasks give higher results, and I think that that's common anywhere you go. So the students had free choice of what sort of books they can review. And in fact, students started reviewing movies as well, which was really interesting. The real audience was each other. So we started having books being reviewed that were in our school library, and students would go in and read each other's reviews, that they'd analysed their books, and they'd review their books, and they'd gone in and they'd read other people's and said, I'm going to borrow that next week. And they saw that little Johnny had read the book, so then they go see Johnny, when you finish reading that book, when we're at the library, can I borrow it after you? So it started off this conversation about the books that they were reading. They're moving into critical analysis and evaluation of the content. They knew that other people were reading this. The moment their audience becomes real, the motivation goes up. So just a few examples. And so this particular child, Charlie, has done his review on Hansel and Gretel. I only taught them how to insert images, but then they realised that they can insert videos into Google Slides, which was self-taught. This is a Year 1 class. So once you ignore the spelling and you look at what the child has written rather than how they communicated it, you start looking to see what their knowledge is and how they're analysing. So I use Google Slides, and I use the commenting feature to give them feedback. Feedback is important. And then when the students started seeing that I was giving feedback in the form of comments, they independently went on. So you can see this little boy, Derek, went on and said, "Nice work, Charlie, keep it up," and gave this child a whole bunch of stars because they knew that you rate things by stars. And then this is where the teachable moments come in. Let's talk about digital citizenship. Let's talk about giving each other positive comments. Let's talking about your digital footprint. So from there, more less teachable moments and lessons started occurring. And then you start looking at, I provided Isabella with feedback. Good job, Isabella. What would you change in the story? She's gone back in and she's added, I would like to change the stepmother to be nice. Very simple change, but she's read my comment. She's taken that feedback on board, and she has now edited her work to add that little bit of based on that descriptive feedback. And as you can see, other children have responded to that. This is actually a guided reading task. And the students started doing it at home for homework, which I then had that talk about, okay, well, you're going home doing it for homework. But by the end of the term, this particular Google slide deck became 169 slides, which absolutely blew me away. The students were passionate about it. These two students you see on the screen, one was a reading recovery student and one is a high EALD student. And they were just going in over and over again and adding the books that they read. And it was phenomenal to see that these students were passionate about sharing the books that they were reading. So not only did literacy levels increase, not only did these students couldn't wait till library day because they needed a new book to review. They started reviewing movies as well. They were doing it at home on top of their homework independently, which blew me away. And there's all these higher order thinking skills where they were proofreading and analysing, editing their text, evaluating each other's writing and work. They were creating as well. And it was so positive to see the way that the students were just engaging in this particular activity. And this is just from a good old Google Slides presentation. And most people don't realise what you can do beyond just having a PowerPoint replacement. And that brings me to the next. And the last thing I want to talk about is student choice, building agency in students. I'm a strong believer that students need to become agents of their own learning. And as I mentioned before, I mainly have worked most of my career actually in the infants grades. Many years in kindergarten, moving from year 1 to now year 2. And building that independence and both in independent learners and understanding how they learn is really important to my personal pedagogy and how I teach. So I want students to become agents of their own learning. But when it comes to choice, the misconception is that choice is free for all. Off you go, get started, and there's 30 kids running wild in the classroom going absolutely crazy. Well, I can confidently say that you can walk into my classroom and there'll be students working independently on tasks. They're engaging. It may not be the most quiet classroom, I must admit, but they're engaging in talk, which is essential for EALD students. And I work with a lot of EALD and LaBoat students. And those who don't know what that means, that's English as a second language and dialect students and language backgrounds other than English students. Talk is essential. So demanding a quiet classroom is actually against all EALD pedagogy that happens. The students are engaging in purposeful talk in my classroom. They're asking each other for assistance. They know that they can check in with me and they're all on task, but they're all not working on the same thing. They may be working on similar projects at different levels, but the whole idea is the teacher as facilitator of their learning. I provide my students with structured choice. I give them the options. Sometimes those options are negotiated, sometimes they're given, and the students choose from those choices. For example, we've been working on a geography task this term where the students have to persuade me, persuade me that they should, about travelling to a particular landmark or state in Australia. And I have said, as long as you persuade me, I don't care how you do it. Whether you stand up and talk, whether you create a flyer, a poster, a slides presentation, a video, you've got the choice on how to do it. As long as your success criteria and learning intention is fulfilled. So every child has the same learning intention, but the way they deliver it is showing their higher order thinking and understanding. They're also looking at what their best conditions are for learning. They know what they are. So some examples in my class is some students are working on their iPad, creating a book creator. Some students are using art to communicate. The students who are behind that glass, they're creating a dance. I'm in a Catholic school, so this is a scripture task that they were looking at. Some students created their own paper-based picture book, not even looking at technology. And these students are choosing how they're going to present their information. So I'm just conscious of the time, and I can see that there are quite a few questions. This screen here has all my contacts. If you'd like to contact me either on YouTube, I do have 2 YouTube channels. I am on Twitter, I am on Instagram, and I am on LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect, ask questions, even if you've watched this presentation afterwards, feel free to connect. I'm always ready to help and respond to people. So before I continue, finish off, I want to, hello again, I want to answer a few of the questions that have come through. One question was, where do I find Google Draw? Which is a great question. If you go to your Google Drive, and most people know that they go to the new button on the left-hand side. Under the new button, there's like a little more section. In there are more Google apps that most people don't know about, and all your connected apps through other third-party programs, such as Powtoon. So once you've gone into Powtoon, it'll now then appear underneath the More button. So that was a question from May. I will be sharing out the link to the presentation slides. I will be sharing that out. My YouTube name, so I'm pretty much on all my social media as Geeky Oz Teacher, or Alfina Jackson is my other YouTube channel. Well, someone's asked, do I record my slides using Keynote? I don't usually do slides. I like to use Powtoons. I have used Explain Everything as well. I've created slides using Explain Everything and recorded my flip videos using Explain Everything. Depends on what I'm playing around with and depending on the flavour of the day. Thank you, Bill, for sharing the link to Powtoon. And I'll reply directly into some of these. Google Draw is not on an iPad. I don't even think it's on Android, but do not quote me on that. But it is on, if you have a Chromebook Classroom, you can easily access it on Chromebooks. There are some suggestions of some great other sites I haven't used. I haven't used Yabba. So thank you for doing that. That's a good one for me to explore later. And in Google Classroom, when you create an assignment, so you have to create an assignment and you do link a Google Drive presentation, there is a little drop-down menu once the Google Slides presentation comes up there, whether it's students can view, students can edit, or you can make a copy for each student, and that's in Google Classroom. Heather asked me, am I using Chromebooks or other devices to access. At the moment, I'm in a BYOD iPad classroom, but my previous classrooms have involved exclusively Chromebooks, and some have been a mixture of Chromebooks and iPads as well. So it depends on what you've got in your classroom. All my suggestions are great also for small group. I actually prefer doing flipping in small groups, as I mentioned earlier. And Marianne suggested Kiddle. I haven't used Kiddle. I find that with infants, I tend to do the research for them and then share those links out in a Google sites that I've created for them. So that way I know that these websites are safe. It's teaching them, I'm giving them maximum time to research because they're not having to go through the Google search criteria. With older students, I'd probably use a more kid-friendly search engine. But all my students, when they logged in through their EDU accounts, Google Safe Search is on, so I know that they're searching the best as possible to safe. But is that teachable moments about when you find a website that's inappropriate, you report it to the teacher, you don't sit there giggling at it, and you shut it down straight away. So it's all teachable moments. So thank you so much for logging in today and participating in Google EDU on Air. And I hope to connect with you on social media. Thank you.